world feels a bit toxic and blah these days, doesn't it? The same old people coming up with the same old solutions for big problems that still don't work. We need to change the game. Well, welcome to Women Advancing. Join me, host Kate Byrne, in this dynamic bi-weekly podcast, bringing together female founders, funders, and thought leaders. Listen to the people driving change, how they got there, how you can help, and yep, how you might just be the next one to advance. Proof that all ships rise with women at the helm. That's what happens when Women Advance with Kate Byrne. Today we're going to be speaking with Toyosi Ogunseye. She's the CEO of Presidential Precinct, which is a nonprofit here in Virginia area that each year takes a number of cohorts from the African continent and educates them on how to become better leaders. Some are civic leaders, some are legal leaders, some are entrepreneurs. It's an extraordinary program that has amazing results and was initially started by President Obama, along with Montpelier, James Madison, James Monroe, and the Thomas Jefferson Foundations. And it's extraordinary. Toyosi's story is amazing for a lot of different reasons, but primarily because, can you imagine starting off as a wannabe surgeon and then ending up running the African BBC from London? That's just one of the many amazing things that she's done, and so many pearls of wisdom. My favorite is, a closed mouth is a closed destiny. So what exactly does she mean by that? Ha! You have to listen to find out, and you'll be glad you did. Toyosi Ogunseye, CEO of Presidential Precinct. Welcome to Women Advancing. I've got to say, to me, one of the reasons why I'm so excited is because you have been both in the media realm, and then you shifted over to, frankly, social impact realm.
Yes.
So I've got another person who's done it. I've done it, but not quite to the extent that you have. So I really am looking forward to hearing how all those various steps came about. And you took it one step further. You went to an entirely different country, two entirely different countries. So there's chock-a-block to dive into.
Yes.
So people always assume that, when we're getting our starts, that at least the younger generation always assumes, oh my gosh, it's so linear. And it was this after this after this. There may be, my experience, especially in these conversations, maybe there are a few people who've had that. But, I think it's usually pretty rare. So share a little bit about your path and kind of essentially your journey and how you got to where you are.
Thank you so much. I'm so delighted to have this conversation with you. Indeed, even if you look at life isn't linear. Nothing is really linear. Most people don't even know that my first degree was in biochemistry. And the plan, absolutely, biochemistry. And the plan was to study surgery. So if I didn't end up as a journalist, I would have ended up as a surgeon. It's something I still love till tomorrow. I wish I could go back to medical school on the side and still become a doctor.
Wow.
That was the plan. Study biochemistry, first degree, go to school of surgery, become a surgeon, and that was it. In my second year in the university, I was talking to my best friend, and we're talking about, our passions. I loved to write. I still love to write. And she said, you know what? You really love to write. Why not start writing commercially or publicly? Just start developing your passion beyond just being an hobby. I said, okay. It was my 19th birthday. And I walked into the biggest tabloid newspaper in my country called The Sun. I introduced myself to the editor and I said, my name is Toyosi. I'm a 19-year-old undergraduate at the University of Lagos, and I'd like to write for you. This man looks up at me and says, excuse me, what did you say your name was again? From where? I introduced myself all over again and said, what experience do you have that qualifies you to be a journalist in my newsroom? So I gave him this big journal. I had this big journal where I used to write my poems, my articles, and I gave it to him. And he laughed and said, no, that's not what I want. Have you written stories before? I said, I haven't, but I can. He said, okay. It was a Tuesday. I remember so well. Tuesday, 21 years ago.
Isn't it funny?
And he said to me, go back to your campus and bring me 2 stories by Friday. Went back to my campus and brought him 3 stories by Thursday. That
Take that.
Thursday, I was talking to him when the crime editor walks into his office and says, "News editor, do you have extra crime stories on your table? I'm short 2 stories and I need to close the crime." He turns and looks at me and says, "Well, I don't have extra stories on my table, but this young woman has just come from University of Lagos and she has 3 crime stories with her." The crime editor takes the stories and says, looks at them and says, "Did you write this yourself?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Thank you. These are the stories that are going into the crime section tomorrow."
Oh my gosh.
Anyway, that was how I started my career as a journalist.
Talk about serendipity, all the things.
And did I finish biochemistry? Yes, I did. I finished biochemistry. But by the time I finished biochemistry, I realized, okay, maybe I need to spend more time with journalism before I go back to medicine and surgery. But as you can tell, I spent too much time doing journalism. And I said, okay, bye surgery, bye medicine. I'm going to stick with journalism. And I did journalism for about 20 years until 2022, actually until 2023.
Wow. You know
Yes.
what's fascinating about that? I was just moderating a panel last night and we were talking about women and financial fluency and things like
Yeah.
that and prowess and founders and are people afraid to be founders and you know people are thinking, oh, I can't do it because I don't have the skills. But the
Yes.
truth is we have more skills than we know that we do. And oftentimes it's called something else in a different genre. And
Yes.
I'm sitting here thinking about, in my mind, I automatically went to, okay, so surgery,
Yes.
you know, and biochemistry, all that.
Investigation. It's investigation, number one. It's
Yep.
analysis. It's the ability to ask questions. It's being meticulous. It's empathy. It's critical thinking.
It's
And it
all
was
of
all
it.
those skills as a biochemistry undergraduate, spending so many hours in the lab. I mean, my thesis as an undergraduate was trying to cure diabetic albino rat with yogurt. That was my thesis. And in fact, my supervisor told me at that time that, you know what, if you keep the path and you stay the course, you might find the cure to diabetes one day.
Wow, my gosh.
Yeah, because I was so keen on trying to reverse this. So I made the rats diabetic. That's the first thing. I got
Right.
this, rats in the lab, made them diabetic. And my whole investigation was to see the effect of yogurt on diabetes and see if feeding this diabetic rats a yogurt protocol will reduce their blood sugar.
Right, exactly.
My supervisor in university was so excited about my project. And he said, you know what, here, so why don't you just keep it this? Good, take this to your master's level, take this to your PhD level, and maybe one day you'll be the one to find the cure for diabetes in the world. So again,
Well,
back to your point, it's the ability to just ask questions. That's what science is about. So there's very little difference between science and journalism because it's just asking critical questions.
exactly. It's curiosity. Absolutely. And
Absolutely.
determination and kind of wanting to get to the bottom of the root of it.
Absolutely.
How did this happen? Not just,
Absolutely. So I'm actually a scientist.
yes. Oh, I love that. And I can't wait to see what happens because, you know, here's Steve Jobs back in 2005 did a famous speech at Stanford's graduation and talked
It's in
about.
my office. That speech is in my office, printed out on the board in my office.
Are you kidding? I love that speech.
Yes.
And it's so true. And
Yeah.
that one piece about what's going to be, you know, your crucial dot, that piece that ties it all. And I guarantee you it's going to come back. Surgery's going to come back somehow. Or
I
maybe it'll
think
be
it will.
metaphorical still.
I think it will. I think it'll come back somehow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I can't wait. So then, and you kind of alluded to it already, but what skills would you say that you really relied on? So let's wait. You got into you're 19, you get this job, woo, and then you stay.
Yes.
And then what happened next? I mean, and what skills did you rely on?
I loved it too much. I loved it too much. I had a
Yeah.
fantastic boss because, again, I think that when you start your career, your first boss matters. Whoever you work with the first is likely to determine how far you can go. And so I had an amazing boss and I loved it. It was really encouraging. And talking about skills, I think the first thing is just to do what you love. I know that it sounds very cliche, but it's just the truth. Do what you love. I loved it so much, and it wasn't like work for me. And perhaps that was why I excelled at it so much because I just loved it. I just loved it. So do what you love. I was doing what I loved. Second thing is do it as well as you can. Do it as well as you can. I still think that there is room for excellence, and there's a difference between excellence and perfection. And so I was doing what I loved, and I was doing with as much excellence as I could muster.
Yep.
And also, recognizing the people around me that could help me. I strongly believe that excellence attracts excellence. And so because I was putting in my best, I was a young 19-year-old in the newsroom, still going to school studying biochemistry, but all my editors, who were really excellent, all the most senior journalists in the newsroom, we just kind of gravitated towards one another.
It is true. Excellence and perfection are very different.
Yes.
And I love the notion of mastering excellence.
Absolutely.
I
And
love that phrase.
mastering excellence is just about consistency.
Exactly.
That's it. You do it over and over and over. It's like with anything, even with cooking. You'd see that the more you cook something, you get better at it. The more you drive, you get better at driving. So it's just about consistency. You just have to do it over and over and over again, and you keep getting better.
Absolutely. And you get more, you get better, you get more efficient, and I think
And more
you
confident.
also get more influential and impactful.
Absolutely. And you get more confident. Even the way you carry yourself,
Yes.
everything is intertwined. The skill, the confidence, the fluency, because when you get better, people are telling you you're getting better. You're winning awards that are telling you you're getting better. And it boosts your self-esteem, it boosts your self-confidence, it opens more doors to you, and everything is just pushing you further, and that excellent part.
And then it just flows. What were some of the shifts that took place after you got this first job? Then what kind of came next? I know you did a couple of different
I did.
moves. Yeah.
So my first job was at the Sun newspapers as a crime reporter. I was a crime reporter for about 10 years.
Wow.
So did crime
Was that
reporting.
hard? Sorry for interrupting, but
It's
was that
hard.
hard?
It's hard. It's very male dominated. It's very long hours. It's very impromptu. But you see, this was a 19-year-old girl that had no worries in the world. I was in control of my time. So if I wasn't in school or in the lab, looking after my diabetic rats or studying organic and inorganic chemistry, I had every time to myself. So I worked really closely with the police. It was hard, but it was fun. So I did crime reporting, and it wasn't structured. So
Right.
I could be in school on campus when I'd get a call from the head of homicide saying, oh, wow, we've just cracked this case, and I want you to be the first person to report it. Because again, with journalism, you're also leveraging exclusivity. And
Of course, yes.
about building relationships. And we're going to talk about how all of this have translated into further roles, because a good journalist is able to maintain contact and is able to service those contacts, is able to make them rely and confide in you, knowing that you are going to keep them anonymous. So it's about building relationships. The more relationships you have, the better scoops and more exclusives. And so along the line, I think, honestly, a lot of my sources were just intrigued by this 19-year-old girl.
I'm sure they were. They're thinking, who is she? I just want to see her.
I think they were just intrigued because every other crime reporter in my country at that point was like maybe 20 years older than I was. And there was this
and a guy,
young girl jumping all over the place looking for exclusives. So I think he was just curious. And they're like, okay, we're just going to help her. She's so young. We're just going to help her.
And they probably loved the spirit and the gumption you had.
Absolutely.
Right? It's like it reinvigorated them.
Absolutely. So all the crime, the police officers, the army, the immigration, the anti-corruption agencies, they had my number. When there's a big story breaking, they'll call me to say, we just made this arrest. Do you want to be the first to come? And I'll be there in a jiffy. I'll write the story. Bear in mind that 21 years ago, the internet that we have now wasn't as it is then. So I couldn't even send. So think about how complex it was then. So it wasn't like I could write stories on my phone. No, I mean, you had to write on paper and give it to the lady in the office who would type it out for you. And I amassed so many contacts. There were so many people who just loved helping me. And I ended up becoming my country's most popular crime reporter. In my country, one ended up winning the most awards. And I did that for a bit, moved to another newspaper called New Star as a senior investigative reporter, worked on New Star for a bit, and moved to Punch newspaper, which is Nigeria's biggest daily newspaper. Wow. As a senior editor, I rose through the ranks, became a news editor, and became the first female editor in my paper's 45-year history. And I think this
Wow.
was when I was 29.
Oh
And
my gosh. And under 30. Look at you.
thank you. And the only thing I didn't win was the Pulitzer. I mean, because my country didn't qualify, as a place where you could enter in for a Pulitzer. It's an American prize. But everything outside of a Pulitzer, I won them all.
There's still
And
time. As I said, I'm rooting for you. I will not be surprised when I read about this, but keep going.
thank you. So I did that. And at the age of 35, I think, I had edited the newspaper for about 6 years. Now,
Yeah.
here's the thing. That was the most senior editor job in my country. Nigeria is a
Mm.
country of over 200 million people. When you become the editor of the Punch, send the Punch. There's nothing else to do after that. That's the
You've
zenith.
done it.
Yeah.
You've reached the
You've
mountaintop.
done everything all. So I had two options. Go into government, because that's usually the path, and become, say, the spokesman to the president, or start my own newspaper. Those were the options, honestly. There was no other job other than editor the
Wow.
Sunday newspaper. And here was I, 35 years old or 34 years old. And I said, you know what? I don't want to be the spokesman of anybody. If this is the highest job in my country, then it's time to look outside of Nigeria. Now, in retrospect, I think, should I have started my own newspaper? Should I have started my own platform? Maybe. But one day I was in my office. It was a Monday. I was driving into work when I got a call from a UK number. And the person introduces herself and says, my name is XYZ from the BBC. We're looking for the head of the West African region. We've done the search twice and we haven't found somebody, but your name keeps coming up. However, we've been told that you will not leave Punch. But if you want to consider this, would like to get you to apply for the job. But the third application process is closing today. So I said to her, I'm not going to mention her name. She was head of talent for the BBC. So I said to her, I'm sorry, my Monday is really busy. It's a really busy day for me. I couldn't apply today. She said, send me your CV and I'll put in your application. I sent her my CV. She put in my application. This is a complete stranger. Never been happy before in my life. She put it in my application, and a week after I got an email saying, could you please come to the UK for your first interview? And long story short, that was how I got the job as head of Western Africa for the BBC, and I lashed a Punch.
Oh my God. Your story reads like some sort of spiritual novel where manifestation came
I
about.
think it is. I think it is.
Yes.
I
It's
think about these things,
fantastic.
and it's apparent that there is a superpower behind all of this, because the way these things are just happening, and that is why even when I get worried about the future, I'm just like, you know what? Things have just
It'll
always
be
happened, and you'll be
okay.
fine. You will be
It's always
fine.
worked out.
So
And,
I went
and
to the big, yeah, go ahead.
well, I was just going to say, I think also what happens is when we find, when we best laid plans, right? Quickest way they always say to make God laugh is to tell him, how it's going to work out. And like, yeah. And the truth is, so often my experience has been when I haven't gotten what I thought I was supposed to get, something more spectacular comes around. And if you had told me I was going to ever get that, as is your case, I'm sure you were like,
Yeah,
no, there's no way.
absolutely.
I have
Absolutely.
I have a question for you going from reporter to
Mhm.
editor.
Yeah,
Different skills. I mean, I know 'cause
absolutely.
having a media background myself, but so how was that for you?
So even as an editor, I was still reporting,
Yeah.
because once you're a reporter, you keep reporting. But I think that I also understood that to rise in my career, I needed bigger responsibilities to manage other people. And I suppose you just have to be really clear about what you want. There's some people who just want to be on the field forever, and that is fine. However, the challenge with being on the field is you're not likely to become a newsroom leader.
Ever.
But I wanted the best of both worlds. And the deal I struck with my managers then was, with my directors, was I'll edit, but I'll write from time to time. They're like, do whatever, as long as you edit. I understood that if I stayed on the field, I would never rise in my career beyond being
Yeah.
on the field. And
Yeah.
so it was a win-win for me. The good thing was my editing didn't stop my field work. But back to your question, I'm the first child of my parents, and I think I've learned a lot of management. I have lots of cousins who are younger than myself, so I've always been like the mom of the house. But bringing all those skills to the newsroom, I think that when people respect you, it's easy for you to lead. And because people knew what my helper was, even though I was the youngest in the newsroom, even though I was being asked to manage all those people who were in their 50s and in their 60s as a 20 maybe 24-year-old girl, 27-year-old girl, because they had seen my output over the years, they couldn't dispute my professionalism. They couldn't
Right.
dispute the fact that I knew my job. It
Right.
also helped. I had senior editors who were supporting me, who believed in me.
True.
So it's a combination of you being really good at your job,
Right.
getting people to respect that output, and having people supporting you. And also you just believing in yourself.
But exactly. I was going to say tremendous street cred. And
Yes,
you know what I
absolutely.
mean? Because you've done
Absolutely.
it. You have, as you said, you've got the output. Walking in with all of that, I would think I could see how some would be nervous, upset, jealous, a little
Quite a
green-eyed.
lot. Quite a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, if they were to shift and think, oh my gosh, if she was able to do this, what could she teach me?
But you
And
know what?
that's where
I
the
didn't think that
humility,
way.
right?
And that's the difference between leaders and followers most of the time. Or should I say that is the difference between excellent people and other people. I think it's just being able to put your emotions aside. And I say this to myself all the time. Just the ability to separate your emotions from your purpose
Yeah.
and understanding that, I mean, you can help your feelings most of the time. And we're human beings, we'll always fail. But just asking yourself, is my feeling aligned with my purpose? Sometimes your feeling aligns with your purpose, but most of the time it doesn't. And it is that maturity to understand that even though I feel this way, I'm gonna sit on this feeling and go with my purpose. And that is really hard work. That's really
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So I'm probably now did you call upon that quite a bit when you moved up to London and did you run the BBC from London? Yes. Or
Absolutely. So my first job was head of West Africa, and that entailed the whole of West Africa, including Anglophone Africa. So I had two briefs on that job. The first one was to keep us in really difficult markets. The BBC was having a really tough time
Hmm.
operating into market because governments didn't want us there. And so my job was to ensure we stayed there. So it was loads of negotiations with government, loads of strategy with government, loads of going to court and defending the BBC. And my second brief was expanding the BBC's audiences on the continent. So I did that for about 3 years, and there was a big reshuffle in the BBC in the UK. And the directors were given a task in the UK. And the task was they needed to find, I think it was called the Sponsorship Pathway Program. All directors were to pick one person in senior management that they ought to become a director of the BBC and maybe even the DG of the BBC in the future and support that person. And my directors picked me. And to do that, I needed to move to the UK permanently. So my former job with the BBC was the whole West African continent. So I spent 3 months in Nigeria because Nigeria was the BBC's biggest African market, and
Right.
spent 3 months in Senegal. That was my francophone base, huge. All my French operations went out from
Yeah.
Senegal and DRC Congo. And I'll spend another 3 months in the UK because all my TV teams were in the UK. So for 3, 4 years with the BBC, I wasn't in a place for more than 3 months. But then I moved permanently to the UK through the sponsorship pathway for senior managers. And that was the pathway to becoming a director in the BBC. And that job in the BBC was looking after our core breakfast programs. So I looked after our core breakfast programs, looked after our podcast for young people on the African continent. And I did that for about 2 years. And in 2022, I said to myself, I wanted to do something else.
Man. So before we jump to presidential precinct, I've got
Yeah,
to ask, it just dawned on me. So you oversaw TV plus radio, right?
absolutely.
Oh, multiple. And is there a lot
Digital.
of different, did you find that to be very different or were those so similar? Because as a magazine person, which is always
Yeah.
what I'd been, that and web, I
Yeah.
never worked in radio. I did a minute in newspaper, but
Yes.
I always thought broadcast was broadcast, and I'm sure that's not true.
No, that's not true.
I knew it.
TV is very different from radio. It's very different from digital. Now, the good thing was I had editors looking after all this. So even though I was
Yeah.
the head of the region, there was head of TV. So those teams were not reporting to me directly. They only had all the editors reporting to me. My job in the morning was to ask one question. What are our audiences talking about today? What are our audiences interested in today? What is the data? Because we had all the software tools. What's the data telling us? What's the software telling us about what people want to know today? And what people want to know in India, It's different from what people want to know in the United States. It's different from people want to know in Senegal. And my
Right.
job every morning was to go through all this data I was receiving as early as 4 a.m., 5 a.m., and giving editorial direction to my team and saying, guys, we're going this way this morning. 80% of women in Arizona are searching this topic this morning. You need to give them a story backing up that search. 75% of young people in Ghana are researching this morning. I need to give them the answer to that question. In Northern Africa this morning, this name is trending. Respond to that. And so it was basically editorial direction. And once I gave that editorial direction, all the editors went back to their teams and work started. And throughout the day, you were checking the charts, you were checking the software, what are the results, what are people reading, what questions are they asking, what line are they staying on? And so that was half of my job. The second half of my job was, okay, we have a big problem in DRC Congo. Our TV licenses are in jeopardy. I need to go into DRC Congo and talk to the Minister of Information there and negotiate this deal to keep us in DRC Congo. So it was both editorial direction and keeping us in really volatile markets.
Right. Wow. So tons of variety and actually lots of different aspects to keep your brain clicking.
Absolutely.
Learning so much.
So much. And the biggest learning is how to work with people.
Absolutely. And different personalities and different
Absolutely.
generations,
Absolutely.
cultures.
Yes, 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 yes.
I think that's part of the biggest issue right now that we've got going on is the generational and then essentially the distributed workforce. I think it's great. I understand it.
Yeah.
But you really do, if you thought everyone just has to kind of suck it up and because I said so, you're going to do it.
Yeah, it's not going to work.
Those days were gone for a long, long time ago.
Absolutely.
So,
And one of the things I really, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say one of the things I also learned was the art of negotiation, how to negotiate really well. It was a skill I had to learn very quickly.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I can, So 2022 arrives. Dun, dun, dun. And you decide, I want something different.
I was exhausted.
Understandably, the thought of getting up at 4 a.m, looking
I
at
was exhausted. I think that for 2022, I had worked nonstop for about 18 years or 19 years, and I was tired.
Yeah.
I was exhausted. I don't even want to go into all the details. And I told myself, you've done everything that a journalist can do in their career, and you've risen through the ranks. You've held the most senior position in your country, Nigeria. You came to the UK, and at the point in the UK, I was arguably the most senior African woman in the BBC. And if I'd stayed the course, maybe I'd have been the first Black Director General of the BBC in the future. But at that point, I was exhausted, and I wanted to do something else in my life.
Yeah.
And I said, what I'd like to do is pivot to a non-journalism job where I'll still get to use all my skills, all my soft skills that I amassed, just do something. Now, the second motivation for that is I strongly believe that I have so many parts to me.
Right.
And even though I enjoyed journalism, that's not the only thing there is to me.
Right.
That isn't the only, and I wanted to explore other parts there was to me. And I kind of thought it was time to reinvent myself, because what everybody knew about me at that point was Toyosi is a journalist and she's a newsroom leader. She'll go to Parliament and ask for more money from the UK Parliament to do journalism on the continent. But it was just time to, so it was two things. I was tired, I was exhausted, but I also wanted to reinvent myself. And that started the journey to the president vacancy.
Great. Wow. Because that takes a lot of courage too. Well, it takes courage, one, to do it, but then to do it and move.
Yes.
Yet again.
Yes.
To the US, no less.
Yes.
And what a fascinating time post-COVID.
Yes.
And amidst everything.
Yeah.
That's only gotten even bigger. So how did you find out about the presidential precinct? And why don't you share with folks a little bit about the mission of Presidential Precinct, because it's a fabulous organization.
Yes, it is. So 11 years ago, I'd come to the Presidential Precinct on a leadership program. I still remember I was in my newsroom. I was editor then of the Sunday Punch newspaper. And as the editor of a newspaper, it didn't matter where you were in the world. You followed all the social media pages of government
Right.
World. So you'd follow the White House, you follow the UK Parliament, you follow everybody.
Right.
So on my Facebook page, I used to follow the White House. And on this day, there was a video, President Barack Obama came on online and said, "My name is President Barack Obama, and I'm announcing the Young African Leaders Initiative. If you're an African leader between ages 25 to 35, I'm looking for you. I want to bring you into the United States just to support you to become a better leader." I was like, "Oh, what's this about?" So I looked at it, I qualified, and I applied for the program. It's now called the Mandela Washington Fellowship Program.
Right.
Applied for it, and I was selected, and that brought me to the Presidential Precinct for the first time 11 years ago. So
That's
what,
crazy.
so what is the Presidential Precinct? The
Yes.
Presidential Precinct is basically a five-member consortium. It's made up of University of Virginia, William and Mary, Montpelier, Monticello, and Ireland. Those are the homes of Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, and James Monroe. So those five organizations all sit on the board of the Presidential Precinct. And basically what the precinct does is you work with partners like the US government, that's the State Department, to help international leaders develop their ideas around rule of law, democracy, social justice, economic empowerment, and civil justice. So we're basically a soft power diplomacy think tank looking
Yeah.
for young leaders from everywhere, whether in Africa, Southeast Asia, Latin America. We basically look for young leaders,
Right.
and what we do is invest in them to become better leaders in their countries. And we do that through exchange programs. So every month we have all kinds of exchange programs for all categories of leaders. And when they come to us, I ask two questions. My first question is, who are you? And when I mean who are you, it's not just about your name, it's your journey. I want to understand your journey. And my second question is, what do you do in your country? And how can I help you do it better? And so my job is to match these leaders with all the resources in the Presidential Precinct Vault and give
Wow.
it to them and equip them to go back to their countries to become better leaders. And that's what the precinct does. It's what we've done for over a decade. We've impacted thousands and thousands of leaders from all over the world to become better leaders.
Which is fantastic. And then now how often do the alumni, do they gather often?
Absolutely. It's one of the biggest things I've been thinking about since I got on this job a year ago, and that is to make up, because we have thousands of alumni all over the world, and it's
Yeah.
how to bring us together and organize that as a really intentional and proactive community. And you're going to be seeing more of that in 2025. And we're thinking about things like, even if it's a virtual summit, bringing a speaker, looking for opportunities for members of our alum community. I mean, I just finished close to a program for 20 international Supreme Court judges. It was called the Judicial Fellowship Program, where I think we had 25% of the Ukrainian Supreme Court on that program. We had the head of the Supreme Court in Brazil, Ecuador, Peru,
Oh my
Brazil.
goodness.
Basically, because what I do so well, what the precinct does so well is ability to identify the right people and
Right.
bring them together to begin to challenge one another. It's community building. It's as simple as that. And these are people who would never have met one another. Again, that's the other thing. Bringing complete strangers who are doing the same thing in different parts of the world, who would never have met one another, identify them, put them together for 2 weeks, and say, guys, you know what? How can you support one another now
Right.
and in the future? Yes, I'll give you the resources, but more importantly is, how can you challenge yourselves? And it was interesting because the thing with having like-minded people is right from the airport, they meet one another. There's instant connection because they have the same ideals, they have the same values, they respect one another, and they become
Yeah.
best friends in 2 weeks. And they're saying, what's going on in your country? How can I help you? And so the strength is building a community for like-minded individuals that would inspire them to go back to their countries, reinvigorated to do better for their people.
Right. Which is amazing. And so is this a program? The thing that probably is fantastic is it does this great work. Are there others like it?
Not like the precinct. There are
That's
other
what I
organizations
thought.
who not like the precinct, and that is why, my job for the next 1 year is to go out and get the precinct in as many people's
Right. How
homes
do you
as
scale?
possible and
Yeah.
scale that. There is no other consortium like ours in the United States of America.
Right.
That
Which
has
is
two universities and three presidential sites. We are the only ones. I mean, a few universities will do exchange programs, but only the precinct is a consortium that does this in the whole
yeah,
of the United States of America.
which is amazing. And also, and the university exchange program's a whole different kettle of wax, very different
Absolutely.
situation altogether.
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh, I can't wait to hear how this kind of goes on because it's such a smart way. And I was
Yes.
going to say, up to this point, it's a little stealth. So people don't get in your business and you can just get it done.
Absolutely.
And that's
Absolutely. And that's the
right.
strength because it's very stealth. They see the result, but they don't
Yeah,
see what's behind the result.
exactly. Exactly. Nothing to see here behind the curtain, but look at that. That's the
Yes.
thing that's so great. And
Yes.
oh my gosh, okay. I got chills going,
Oh, thank
which
you.
is really exciting. So I guess one of the things, and I've been fortunate enough to get to go to see and meet some of the different leaders that you posted, which have been
Yeah.
lovely.
Yeah.
I was very impressed with the entrepreneurs. I loved seeing a number of women
Yes.
in both cohorts, actually, both in the
Yes.
civic leaders, but also the other.
Professional.
Yeah.
That's right. I mean, it's a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer. You know, when I was at the BBC, there's a metric we use for performance, and that was female engagement. And I'll tell you something. Every story that had a high percentage of female engagement will do well because women share. It's as simple as that. A woman likes something, she's telling everybody about it.
So true. It's
And so
done. I agree.
it's just when a woman thinks something is nice, she's telling her friends, oh, by the way, do you know I got this? Do you know I read that? She's telling her friends, she's telling her kids, she's telling her neighbors. We are sharing people.
Yeah.
And if you wanted to know how well your story was going to do in the BBC, you just need to look at the female engagement. If that story had a high female engagement, that story would go viral.
Would take off. Exactly.
It was it was as sure as
Wow.
the morning sun, honestly. And so I know that because for years and years, I've worked in newsrooms working on statistics, measuring rates,
Right.
measuring time, measuring how women engage, how men engage, how people below 18 engage. I've spent years doing this. And
Yeah.
so I know that if you want something to do well, you need to bring the women in.
Yeah. That's the
Right.
chemistry. That's the chemistry of journalism, in
Yes,
essence, in a lot of ways.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Oh my gosh. What is it like, or how has it been shifting
Mhm.
from a for-profit? Well, is the BBC for-profit? I should know this.
No, it's not for profit because it's funded by government and
Oh, okay,
taxpayers.
of
Yeah,
course. All
but
right.
it's
So it's
fine because I used to work for a profit. I mean,
yeah,
all my life in my country, Nigeria, I had to sell newspapers, so it was for profit. And so I
right.
moved from for profit to government and then to nonprofit.
But the nonprofits that you're working for are highly functioning
Yes.
because so often, too often, frankly,
Yes.
sadly, that's not the case.
Yes.
Is there a program that sort of helps some of the nonprofit leaders in the African continent that you all are developing?
I'm not aware of
Yeah,
any, but what we do is for all our programs, we definitely have nonprofit leaders come on it.
right.
Working in whether it's the democracy space or rule of law, we definitely do have nonprofit leaders coming in our programs.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Amazing. What do you see as the greatest opportunity for women moving forward?
That's a really good question. That's a really good question. What is the biggest opportunity? I think number one, the biggest opportunity is the fact that there's technology. And, you know, sometimes when I'm faced with a decision, I say to myself, this is not what my forebearers died for. And so I'm going to make better decisions. You know, I'm not going to make a foolish decision because women that came before me didn't die, they didn't give up everything for me to be foolish.
Right.
I think that number one, the biggest opportunity is technology.
Yeah.
And I think that the more technology diversification there is, the more opportunities there'll be for women. And so it's how can we leverage technology as women?
Right.
I think, and when I talk about technology, it's even as simple as even social media platforms, because a lot of us are coming from decades where women couldn't talk, women couldn't engage in so many things, and social media has democratized all of that.
Right.
And I say this as someone who is very shy on social media, but I also understand the power of social media and technology and the difference it makes in getting women's opinions out, also using that to grow businesses. It's such a powerful tool. So I'll say,
Right.
yeah, there's a future in leveraging technology. I think the second is also the power of women coming together. I
And
think,
stand by each other,
yes,
especially when people are doing well. That's the thing that
yes.
how often, and you clearly have experienced this, when you're doing well, all of a sudden it's such a sense of betrayal when a woman tears you down or
It
is
is,
not
it is.
supportive. It's so sad. And we're never going to get anywhere if we keep doing that to each other.
And I think it's about questioning why do we do that? Because a lot of these things are passed on. I really do not think any woman wakes up in the morning and says she's going to antagonize another woman.
I,
But I
yes.
think, but I think that there's something in our subconscious, and there's something about how we love to please other people,
Yeah.
and how all of that gets in the way of us supporting one another.
Yeah. Agreed. Scarcity mindset. Whereas there are
Yeah.
only three seats around the table. And I understand the validity of that. I get where that comes
Yes.
from, but that's why we need to not do that so we can get more seats.
And I like the point you raised on scarcity mindset, because it's something you have to constantly question within yourself.
Mhm.
Yeah,
And is it yours in the first place?
absolutely.
Is it something that was handed down because that was the reality of those before us? I mean, I've actually talked with I just had this conversation this morning with my eldest daughter, who's 29, and we
Yeah.
were joking. She's getting ready to get married and she's doing it very differently. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's, wow. And she said, yeah, Mom, all of you could have done this. But I said, I know we never thought to ask, or we didn't think. We just didn't do it. That wasn't how it was done.
You
And
just raised a critical point
yeah,
about asking. My philosophy on asking is, if you don't ask, you never know.
it's done.
Just
Exactly.
ask. Just ask. Just ask. And if you feel intimidated by asking, just think about the consequences of not asking. I think about the consequences. I'm like, okay. And when I think about the consequences, I end up opening my mouth. My mom would say that a closed mouth is a closed destiny.
Ooh, I love that.
Yeah. A closed mouth is a closed destiny. And talking about abundance, there are three prisms through which I look at abundance, and even working on myself and my own scarcity mindset. And I wrote it in my journal and I said, I have three prisms of abundance. The first one is, if I don't have it today, that I don't have it today doesn't mean I won't have it tomorrow.
Yep.
Second is, what somebody will not do for me, another person will do for me. And the third is, if my prayers are not answered today, they'll be answered tomorrow. So those are my three prisms of abundance.
No, it's really true. And I think, one of the things that I've come to experience and understand, those are beautiful for stuff,
Thank you.
is that if something doesn't happen, there is a reason. And it could be as much as, even though I think I'm ready, I'm not ready.
Yeah.
Or that isn't ready for me.
That,
Right?
that, and I'm going to add a third layer to that. Who do I need to be for that opportunity I'm looking for?
Exactly. Very, very absolutely true. And how many times have I forced situations only to go, why did I do that?
All the time. All
Silly,
the
silly
time.
girl. All right,
All the
last question with all of this. What advice would you give your younger self, knowing what you know now?
Bet on yourself. Always bet on yourself.
I love that.
Yeah, always bet on yourself.
Because the truth is, if you don't,
Yeah.
how is anyone else? How can you kind of expect anyone else to?
Don't write yourself out of any dream or any opportunity in life. Don't. Don't do it.
Yeah.
Because if your mind cannot conceive it, it's going to be really hard for it to come to you.
Okay. Another manifesting pro move. Yes, true.
It's going to be really hard. So you need to see it. And I say something, the fact that you can see it tells you that it's possible. Because if you couldn't see it, it would never come to your mind if it wasn't possible.
And then you can feel it when
Absolutely.
it's happened. And then,
Absolutely.
bam, everything starts coming.
Absolutely. 11 years ago, working in the newsroom as the editor. I'd come on this program. And if you had told me 11 years forward, I'm going to be coming back here to work in the same organization, it wasn't on my card,
Yeah.
and I still do not know what the future holds. But what I know is I'm going to continue taking it better myself and keep dreaming, because if I can see it, then it's going to happen.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Toyosi, thank you so much. So many pearls. Seriously. And I want you to write a book. I'll write your book. We'll write it together. But seriously, what a fabulous, what a fabulous tale of reality and what it can be when you allow it to be.
Yes.
And you bet on yourself.
You have to. You have to, because if you let people take a bet on you, they're going to undervalue you for lesser than you are. So take that bet on yourself.
Absolutely. No, honestly. All right. Well, listen, on behalf of Women Advancing and Women Advancing listeners, thank you so, so much for sharing. And we'll get together again and we'll have a little subsequent conversation, because there'll be some other areas.
Thank you so much. It's been my honor and delight to join you today.
Wonderful. All right. Well, thank you.
Thanks for listening. May this episode inspire you to move forward. Be sure to go to iTunes, Spotify, katebyrne.co, that's KATEBYRNE.co, or wherever you listen to your podcasts, and listen to even more episodes. Here's to strong women. May we know them, may we be them, may we raise them. And be sure to meet them on the next Women Advancing. Ta till next time.